multi-potentialites. This is Jeff Harry with Rediscover Your Play. Thank you so much for checking out my workshop, How to Play with Your Inner Critic. Yes, I'm referring to it as a workshop. I know it is a recording, but I am a play person, and the best way in which you can get the most out of this actual workshop is to play and try out a bunch of the play experiments that I am going to be offering for you today. So the more that you can actually play with this, the more that you can actually dive deep in this, the more you can be fully present, right? And not just like listen to it like a podcast, but really be in it, the more you can get out of it and the more fun you're going to actually have doing it. So let's get started. 3, 2, 1. So the way in which I love to start my workshop, specifically around inner critic, is with this quote from Elizabeth Gilbert. I've never seen any life transformation that didn't begin with the person in question finally getting sick of their own BS. And what was the BS that I was telling myself in March of 2020? It was, Jeff, you don't have time to make videos. You also sound weird. You also look weird. You just look ridiculous. You look stupid. Actually, you sound stupid. But most importantly, you don't have time. Like, you'd get around to it, but you don't have time, Jeff, to make videos. And I kept telling myself that. And then March 15th, 2020 happened, and the lockdown happened here in the US. And I had all the time in the world. And guess what I did with it? I avoided it. I binge watched Netflix. I watched a ton of YouTube. I scrolled on social media. I did anything I could to avoid making videos. And then finally, after maybe 2 weeks of just wasting time and just chilling, I was like, let me just make one video. Like, it's not that big of a deal. What's the big deal? Just one video. Let me play with this. Let me just try this out and I'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but let me experiment, right? And I made one video. It wasn't that bad. So then I made a video, another video. Oh, wasn't that bad either. And I just kept making videos, and I eventually started to make videos like this.
You're such a loser. Why are you so lazy?
You're here again? Are you ever not hungry?
I think you're great, just the way you are. Ew, be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Now, what was I saying? So the reason why I show that video is for 2 reasons. One is because it truly captures the hypocrisy when it comes to listening to our inner critic over listening to our intuition or our inner child, right? And then the other reason why I show that video is just because, like, this is what I started doing. I just started messing around all throughout the pandemic. And I started to realize this wasn't that hard, that this was actually a lot of fun. And it actually helped me get through this really tough time. I actually started using these videos as a way to cope, as an aspect of my own mental health, to make these videos just to get them out of my head. And what happened by making them and sharing them with other people who actually surprisingly appreciated them, it gave me the bravery to try other things. So I was like, well, why don't I hop on a bunch of podcasts and start talking about, play and just see what happens on there. And I started hopping on podcasts. And again, not that hard and super fun. And I started hopping on more and started hopping on more and started hopping on more. And then all of a sudden I found myself on all of these podcasts. And I didn't realize this, but then I just recently found out when I did the calculation that since March of 2020, I've done about 150 plus podcasts. And then I've created like 350 videos. Actually, it might be more like 400 at this point. But this was, and I don't do this, tell you to brag. I tell you this as like, this was something that I was so scared to do. And then once I embrace the idea of just playing with this idea, this experiment, that it became actually the thing that got me through a really tough time, as well as it expanded what I thought was possible. All of a sudden, I was doing adventures that I didn't even know existed because I was willing to address my inner critic directly, do the thing that really is scary, and then just take that leap. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. So the first play experiment that I ask for you is just like the Elizabeth Gilbert question. What is an old BS story that you're tired of telling yourself? You've been telling you this story for a long period of time, and just like, it's old, it's stale. You tell everybody this, you tell yourself this, and you're just bored at this point. What is that story? And what new story do you possibly want to tell? So I'm going to be offering a bunch of play experiments like this throughout. You can pause this and then just answer these if you'd like, or think about them for later on. But with each and every one, the more you're willing to dive into these play experiments, the more you're going to get out of this. So what is an old BS story that you're tired of telling yourself? And then also, what is a new story that you want to share with the world? So let's go over what we're actually covering today. So what we will be covering is exploring how to play, and how play and the inner critic actually relate, right? Then we're going to discover where the inner critic comes from. Like, where does it come from? You know, then we're going to make ourselves aware of our inner critic. Then we're going to learn how to respond and befriend our inner critic. And then finally, we're going to identify ways to play with our inner critics, right? All right, so we're going to get into this. So I must, if I'm going to connect play with inner critic stuff, then I got to define what play is, at least for me. So I define play as any joyful act where you forget about time, where there is no specific result, no purpose, where you don't have anxiety about the future, you don't have regrets about the past, you are fully immersed in the moment, you are fully in flow, you are fully in your zone of genius, you are doing the thing that makes you come alive. And that can be anything, right? I once had a client that was like, I don't play at all. And I go, well, what do you do that you enjoy doing at work, for example? And she was just like, well, I'm a lawyer. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I take people that hate each other and I get them to agree on one thing. Awesome, tell me more. And as she was telling me, she got super excited about it. And I was like, that's your play. So play can be anything. No judgment on what you think your play is. Just own that as a multi-potentialite, and own the fact that it could be many different things, right? So many different types of play that are out there. All right, so the other part that I love about play is the idea that it's also, it doesn't have to, but it can tie into your ikigai, which is a combination of what you love, what the world needs, what you possibly could get paid for, and what you are good at, right? Passion, mission, vocation, profession, all coming together. Basically the thing that makes you come alive. My business mentor, Stephen Worley, would say, don't you want to get paid to be yourself? Wouldn't that be awesome? You just could get paid to be yourself. Oh my goodness. Yes, that is your ikigai. Ikigai is your reason for being, the reason you wake up. What is it? What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is that? I really feel like that is synonymous or is connected directly to play. So a lot of times people ask, why don't we play anymore? What's the reason for us not playing? Because we have to understand, in this world where everything is perfect, right? And oh, I forgot to also say this, is that I consider play the opposite of perfection. Play is rooted in curiosity, awe, embracing failure. What is perfection rooted in? Saying no. It's rooted in ego, shame, scared of making mistakes, constantly being right? So we have to understand, where is this idea that we can't play anymore come from? And it comes from 148,000 no's. And what I mean by that is Dr. Perlmutter, I believe, said that by the time you reach the age of 18, you have heard the word no 148,000 times, approximately that. And then you've heard the word Yes, approximately 8 to 10,000 times, right? So you hear the word no so much. Then when you're a kid, you are constantly should on all the time. You should do this. You should do that. You should go into business. You should become a doctor. You should become a lawyer. You're like, I'm 6 years old. Why are you giving me advice at 6 years old? Yes, right? Thank you. Okay, a little bit too much. And then you go to your, teenage years, and especially teenagers now, or anyone that is inundated with like social media. We get more information in a day than most people got in the 1950s in an entire year. And what is most of that information telling you? No, it's telling you, no, don't be weird. No, you can't have more than one hobby. No, you can't have more than one job. No, you can't have more than one interest. It's just like constantly telling you not to be yourself and not play. So you're listening to all this noise, all of this propaganda. No wonder it's so difficult for us to play, because we're constantly being told that we shouldn't be ourselves, that we shouldn't be our nerdy, weird, strange, fascinating, multi-potentialite selves. That's what we're dealing with, right? So let's have some compassion for ourselves first and foremost before we dive in, right? Then on top of all of that external inner critic or external critics, then you have your inner critic, right? And you have to understand where it comes from. There's an actual negativity bias designed in your brain. And it's designed to notice only the bad, right? Because it's trying to protect you. So, you could be talking to a room full of people that are fascinated with what you have to say. And there's one person like this that's just like, oh, I don't like you. And you're going to focus directly on them. That is what your brain is actually designed to do. Negativity bias makes us subconsciously give more psychological significance to negative experiences than positive ones of the same intensity, affecting our behavior. Basically, positive, 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 and it's true, I'm a failure. See, negativity. Like we look for it, right? Our brains are designed for that. Well, why? Why are they? Because you got to understand that, and this is a really simplistic way of expressing this, because they found that the left side and the right side of the brain are much more intertwined than this picture shows. But you have to understand your rational mind is very linear. It's very structural. It's very like, okay. And also your rational mind, part of it is also there to keep you alive. That's its main job. That's part of the negativity bias. But we lean on our rational mind when we're like, I think I'm going to take a risk. And your rational mind's like, no. It's all those no's again. It's like, no, don't do that. It's horrible. That's a horrible idea. And we need to be leaning more towards our intuitive mind, our inner child that's more divergent. Because if you think about your life, right, and how it's come up to this point in your life, none of it is linear. None of it. It's just been all over the place, right? And what happens, and Albert Einstein realized this, and what he was mentioning, is just like, in this society, the intuitive mind is the sacred gift, and the rational mind is the faithful servant. But right now in society, we have now created this society that honors the servant, that honors the rational mind, right? And it's completely forgotten the gift, completely forgotten the intuition, completely forgotten the inner child, right? That it's so much about always trying to be rational, always trying to focus on the result, and expectations are the thief of joy. They rob us all the time. So we really need to be figuring out, how can we lean towards our inner child? How can we tap into our intuition? So that's what I'm going to get into next. All right. So we have to understand that in order to do that, we have to get into flow. And this is a very nerdy slide. You don't have to read all of it, but let me just explain what's actually happening in your brain when you're in flow. When you're in a state of play, you're in this flow state where your brain goes from a beta state to a flow state, also known as transient hypnofrontality. Transient is temporary. Hypo is under activity, and then frontality is talking about the frontal cortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. So what happens when you go through transient hypofrontality is a part of your brain actually shuts down. Your inner critic dissipates briefly, but it dissipates. Sports players experience this all the time when they're constantly making decisions and they can't hear their inner critic at that time because they're moving so fast. So when your inner critic actually dissipates and gets quiet, all of a sudden you get this shot of dopamine, right? And then you become highly curious and you start seeing all of the opportunities in front of you. And you felt like this when you've traveled, right? And you're just saying yes to everything. You're like, oh, yes, I'll have another mimosa. Oh, yes, I'll hop on a moped. Oh, yes, I'll go to this deserted island for a party. Oh, yes, all of a sudden I'm dancing under the moonlight and I meet the love of my life. How is this all possible? Because I'm open to saying yes, because I'm open to falling into flow, falling into that river of flow and trusting not only the universe, but trusting my intuition, right? My inner child, that it knows where to lead me, even if I don't know what the result is, right? That's the magic of flow. Now, how do we get into flow? So let me just go through this really quickly, but also in depth. So my play mentor, Gwen Gordon, would talk about how in order to play, you actually have to soothe yourself. You have to calm yourself down first, right? And we learn how to cope from the people that took care of us the most, like that actually showed us how to cope based off of their own coping mechanisms. So if their coping mechanisms are not healthy, you've adopted those. So you have to look at how do I even cope, right? When I am celebrating, what do? Oh, I go shopping. Okay, great. That's awesome. That's what I do when I celebrate. What about when I feel really bad? Oh, I also go shopping. Oh, wait a minute. Now you're combining both together. So we have to again, realize, how do we cope? And then how do we soothe? How do we calm ourselves down? So what do you do, right? When I take a shower, all of a sudden I become calm and I have a flood of ideas. When I go for a walk, when I dance in costume in my house, I have a flood of ideas. So what are the ways in which you actually soothe or calm yourself down? That's the first thing you should explore. Once you soothe yourself, then, and this is a crazy thing that is coming from a play guy, but then I challenge you to get bored. And what do I mean by getting bored? That means what it took me a while to do during the pandemic is stop binge watching Netflix, stop looking at YouTube, stop scrolling through social media. And I'm not saying forever, I'm talking about for 30 minutes, right? Let's start with 30 minutes. 30 minutes to an hour of a day of just allowing yourself to block out all of the noise, because there's so much noise. And I don't know about you, but when I consume a lot, I don't create. It's really hard for me to create. But when I actually allow myself to get bored, right, that's when you start having all those mischievous ideas, right? That's when you're like, ooh, what is that? Well, I could try that. So then what happens is once you get bored, allow yourself to listen to your inner child, right? Allow yourself to listen to those crazy ideas and then identify, I'm going to move myself out of the way, identify those ideas and make yourself, let me just move out, nerve-sighted. Nerve-sighted. What is nerve-sighted? That is nervous and excited. The ideas that make you like, ooh, what if I start a podcast? Ooh, what if I create another video? Ooh, what if I say this thing that I've always wanted to say, but I was so worried about what people think? Ooh, what if I email that person I've been wanting to email for 6 months? Ooh, what if I talk to that person that I really want to talk to, but I've been just so psyching myself out? What if I start writing and maybe I write something like a blog or whatever? What is the thing that you want to make? What is it that you want to create? What is it that you want to do, right? And the thing is then you take action. But the key part about taking action, this is not about what happens next, right? This is really about letting go of the results. Regardless of whether you email that person you've been wanting to email for 6 months, if you take that risk, regardless of whether they email you back, you have now expanded what's possible. You have now expanded in your mind what you're capable of doing. Because what is fear? False evidence appearing real, right? So when you allow yourself to be like, well, let me just try this out, you see what's possible. And then you do what I did, where it's just like, oh, I can hop on podcasts. Oh, now I can create videos. And then all of a sudden this new world opens up and you fall into flow. And then there's this massive adventure that it just awaits you. All right. So then let's get into then diving into your inner critic. How do we address your inner critic directly? So this is my friend Marcia Shondor, and she taught me how to tame my inner critic. And a huge aspect of that is really naming it, exploring it, befriending it, connecting to it. So she taught me this technique, which I'm going to partly show you here. So first off, we have to understand, what is our inner critic saying to us? So what I'm going to want you to do in a moment is I'm going to want you to actually write down what your inner critic is actually saying to you. What are some of the top hits? Marcia would always talk about what are the top hits, the playlist, the ones that you constantly go to. Here are just some that some people hear, like, I can't do it, I'm not worthy, I must be perfect, I must not make a mistake, I'm not good enough, nobody loves me, all of these things. So here are my top hits of my inner critic loves to tell me. So Jeff, hey, you're a loser. You're always going to be a loser. Hey, Jeff, nobody loves you. Hey, Jeff, you're an imposter and you will fail. Hey, Jeff, you've wasted your entire life and you're not going to be able to get it back. And then, hey, Jeff, no one cares about what you have to say. So, think about it. Let me know if any of these are in your top hits list. So what we're going to try in a moment is, what I want you to do is I want you to write down what your inner critic says to you. So pause this video and then write down all of it, as much as you can. Just get it out, every single one, and then try to get them all out of your head so that we can actually look at it. So pause this video and then we'll come back. Have you paused it yet? I'll wait. Okay, we're coming back. Okay, so you've now wrote down what your inner critic says to you, right? So now I want you to actually look at the list, right? Take a look at that, pull out that list and really look at it. And as you're looking at it, like, here, I'm going to look at my list. As you're looking at it, then I want you to ask yourself, what does my inner critic sound like, right? What does it sound like? Does it sound like that bully from 3rd grade? Does it sound like my parents or my aunt and uncle? Does it sound like one of my former bosses? Like, what does it sound like? Who is this character, right? So first, then, so right next to it, what does it sound like? Okay, what does this person sound like? And then the next question I want you to ask yourself is like, okay, what does my inner critic look like? So this is my inner critic. This is Gargamel from the movie, as well as the cartoon from the 80s, the Smurfs. And what Gargamel does is he sucks the life out of everything. He sucks the joy and the fun out of everything. And Gargamel sounds like this. Gargamel sounds like this, and he's just like, you suck, you're the worst, no one loves you, you're a waste of time, you're a waste of space, blah, 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 you're just the worst, right? So that's Gargamel. So what is yours? So again, what does your inner critic look like? What does your inner critic sound like? Now that you also have looked at this list. And then now that you've compiled all this together, now it's time to do the most important part, which is to name your inner critic. Name it, say the name, and don't worry about it being perfect, because that's your inner critic preventing you from naming your inner critic. Watch out, it's going to come at you during this time, but just name it, anything you want, right? Sad Sam, Frugal Frank, Mean Mary, like whatever the thing that comes up for you. But what I want you to do is remember, when you're naming your inner critic, you don't want to name it someone that actually exists. And the reason why is because what we're trying to do is we're trying to separate your inner critic and make a character out of it. That it isn't actually, one of your relatives, right? But it's a caricature of potentially one of your relatives, right? Because we don't want to actually believe that it's real, right? what we want to do is we want to recognize that it's an aspect of your own mind. It's the aspect of your rational mind trying again to protect you. So name your inner critic. You know, mine is Gargamel. What is the name of yours, right? So write down the name right next to it. And then, all right, then the next step. This is when we're going to get a little ridiculous. All right. So now what we are going to do together is we are going to embody our inner critic. And we're only going to embody it for, you know, less than a minute, 30 seconds. But what I want you to do is you're going to read your list. You're going to read your list in the voice, and you're going to act out the gestures just like I did in the movie or in my video. So we're going to all do this together. On the count of 3, you're just going to start saying all the things to the camera. I know this is ridiculous, but we're going to do this together. This is how we're going to get it. We're going to embody it. Are you ready? We're going to 3, 2, 1. Oh my goodness, you're the worst. Oh, Jeff, I can't believe it. Oh, you're such a loser. Oh my goodness. Oh, you're such an imposter. Oh my gosh, nobody cares about you. Oh, you're gonna die alone. Oh, nobody loves you. Oh, did I mention to you that you should never write? You're the worst writer. Oh, your videos suck. Why are you wasting so much time on them? Oh, I can't believe you exist in the world. What a waste. Oh my goodness. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Gibberish, gibberish, gibberish. Oh. Oh. I'm Yes. Isn't that amazing? I'm running this workshop and my mom comes down. This is beautiful. I love it. Okay. Okay. So, how was that for you? How was that? How did you experience that? What was that like? You know, you could even, film yourself doing it and you'll realize how ridiculous it is. That's the main reason why we do this. When I run this actually as a workshop in person, everyone is actually interacting with each other's inner critics. And it's hilarious to watch because you realize, like, why am I taking this person seriously? Why am I taking Gargamel seriously? Because Gargamel's just scared. He's just a scared 3rd grade kid that's trying to protect me about something like, yo, remember you got hurt way back when? So just letting you know, right? That's what it is. And we just need to recognize that and then have love for it, not hate on it, but just recognize that it's ridiculous. Most of the time it's suggesting things to you that are utterly ridiculous, So now that let's just recap what actually just happened, right? So here are the ways in which then you can play with your inner critic in these first portions, right? Is you can actually act out your inner critic. And when you act out your inner critic, you realize how ridiculous it is, and then it gets quiet. You're giving it attention. Awesome. Another way, your inner critic starts to talk to you all the time. You write down what your inner critic says. Another way in which you can calmly quiet it down. You're giving it attention. You're like, yes, Gargamel, thank you. Thank you, inner critic. It's good to know. Okay, I'll write that down. Thank you. Appreciate it. Another thing, I do this with my best friend, Dana. I actually text her. I text my friend and I tell her, hey, Gargamel showed up and this is what he's saying to me right now, right? He just says these things. Oh, hey, this is what's happening. Again, then it gets quiet. Then another way, right, is then we respond directly to our inner critic. So we actually talk to it and we're like, Gargamel, thank you. Thank you for warning me that one time when I was in 7th grade, I tripped and fell in front of a bunch of people and I looked real stupid. So I have to be careful not to trip again, but it's okay if I do look stupid because it's not that big of a deal. But thank you for warning me, right? And then finally, the other way in which you do it is you empower your intuition. You empower your inner child. I showed you one aspect with getting into flow, but I'll show you more ways in which you can empower your intuition and inner child and allow yourself to actually hear your inner child more. So let's dive into that next. So how do you empower your inner child? Do you remember just a minute ago when we talked about all of the mean things that it said to you, right? You're a loser. Nobody loves you. You're an imposter and you will fail. You've wasted your entire life. No one cares about what you have to say. Remember all that, right? Well, now, instead, what you're going to do is you're going to flip what those mean. So I want you to take your list. I want you to cross everything out, and you are going to say the opposite of what you wrote earlier. So instead of I'm a loser, hey, Jeff, you've accomplished a great deal. Instead of saying nobody loves you, hey, Jeff, you're surrounded by people that do love you. Instead of saying I'm an imposter, hey, Jeff, you will succeed and you deserve to actually be here. Hey, Jeff, you haven't wasted your life. You've lived a fulfilling life and you have more life to live. And like anything you do is just a bonus. It's just gravy at this point, you know? And it's just like, hey, Jeff, no one cares what you have to say. Actually, Jeff, many people appreciate what you have to say. So that's what you're going to do now is I want you to actually cross out your inner critic. And then I want you to write down the opposite of what your inner critic is saying. So you can pause the video again, pause it right here, and then write down what the opposite is. All right. So I'll give you about a minute to do that, and you can pause right now. Have you paused? Or are you just waiting to move on to the next thing? No, man, pause it. Let's do this. Cross out that inner critic. And if you haven't made it before, if you didn't do the exercises before, that's okay. Go back and do them because now you've seen it. Go back and do all of them and then let's get to this point because we want to do this together, right? So then cross out all the mean ways in which it has been mean to you, right? And then I want you to say the opposite. So I'll give you some time to do that. All right, we're back. Okay, so now you've crossed it out. You've now written this new list of things that you have to say, right? And I just gave you a preview, what I was going to show you right there. But what we're doing here is you're actually doing something in positive psychology, which is laying new neural pathways. So you've been saying mean stuff to yourself your entire life, right? So you have these certain neural pathways that have been like, they're just embedded in your brain. You can't get rid of them. You just can't. And it's okay that you can't get rid of them. But what you can do is you can lay new ones over the old ones. So when you actually are saying this list, when you're actually, what you're doing is you're actually giving yourself a positive mantra, right? Which is not just woo-woo, but from a positive psychology standpoint, it's partly pattern recognition where you're actually laying these new neural pathways down and being like, hey, you know what? I have accomplished a great deal. And then you start to look for other ways in which you're more accomplished. Hey, you know what? Actually, people do love me. And you start to see and appreciate all the other people that you might not have realized before actually do care for you. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to lay new neural pathways down. You know, we're trying to have this idea of creating a better understanding of who we are, because for so long we've been listening to our inner critic, so we only have one perspective. And then again, and here I'm going to stop sharing my slides for just a moment here and show you it visually, right? So, you know, mean voice, mean voice, mean voice. Can't get rid of it, right? Here's my mean voice that's painting in the background of my inner critic. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to run over. Can't get rid of it. What I can do is I can add my inner child, which then lays down new neural pathways and quiets it. It just quiets it just a little bit. So that's what we're trying to do right here. Is we're just trying to quiet it a little bit, give Gargamel some love, but then actually recognize your inner child, the person that you really appreciate. And you can even name your inner child. I name mine the Gummy Bears because I used to love that cartoon. So yes, we must understand that our brain experiences neuroplasticity and that each time new thoughts and skill carve out new pathways. So what I was talking about earlier, when you actually take that risk, right? When you actually take that leap, what happens is you're actually laying down new neural pathways, and then it actually weakens the old pathways, the mean pathways. So, all of the time, you're always just one risk away. I can't believe I'm quoting We Bought a Zoo, but in We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon, he says, to his son who was like thinking about, telling this girl that he's the love of her life, right? And he turns to his son and he goes like, all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage, 20 seconds of sheer bravery, and I guarantee you something amazing will come of it, right? And that's the risk. That's the way in which each time we can create a new neural pathway. Each time we say a positive mantra to ourselves, each time we take a risk and do something we're really scared, each time we give love to our inner critic and then listen to our inner child. This is happening constantly, right? So that is another way in which you can quiet and play with your inner child. All right, now what actually happens when you address your inner child? What's awesome is all of a sudden you start also setting boundaries to your outer critics. So let's say, you have a toxic person at work and they're constantly saying mean things to you, right? If you've empowered your inner child and you've recognized that, hey, what my inner critic says to me, like, I'm not going to tolerate that and be like, and I'm going to give it love, but I'm also going to be like, don't say those things to me. Those things aren't cool. When an outer critic says something to you and it's just like, well, maybe they say some sly remark, like maybe you don't deserve this job, or I speak the most at meetings because I know what I'm talking about. And then you're like, wait a minute, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Wait a minute, I actually should be doing their job, because I actually should be their boss. Like, what am I doing? All of a sudden you start to set boundaries with your inner critic, you start to set them with your outer critic, and you turn to that Chad and be like, yo, when they say something super mean to you, you go, don't ever talk to me that way. And then what happens is you do that publicly. And then all of these other people are like, oh my gosh, look, Jeff just stood up to Chad. Wait a minute, I want to stand up to Chad too. And they start to set boundaries as well. So there's a ripple effect of actually addressing your own inner critic. You can empower others to address their own inner critic as well, so that they don't get treated horribly by that toxic person named Chad. And if this is our Chad listening to this, I'm sorry. I apologize. But we had to use you as an example. I apologize. All right. So dealing with your outer critic actually then allows for you to help so many other people as well. So realize this work you're doing is not just for you, but for everyone that you interact with. Now, going into the play experiment number 4, another way to empower your intuition, to empower that inner child, to empower the gummy bears, is to ask yourself this question. And this is a question that changed your entire day. I learned this from my friend Desiree, who taught me that regardless of how my day's going, whether it's good or bad, I can ask myself this question with curiosity. How can it get any better than this? Ooh, how can it get any better than this? So let's say something bad happened. You're like, oh, well, how can it get any better than this? And what you're doing is you're actually, again, setting up your brain to look for patterns of actually how it can get better. So a perfect example is, right, I start my day with a TikTok video. Ooh, that was so much fun. How can it get any better than this? Ooh, now I'm going to brainstorm a new workshop with a friend of mine. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Ooh, now I'm going to hang out with my family, and spend some time with them. We're going to watch the Olympics together. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Oh, later on, I'm going to make some more TikTok videos because I got inspired. How can it get any better than this? And you would just start stacking. Oh, now I'm going to do this presentation for y'all. How can it get any better than this? I don't know if it can get better, right? But this idea of asking yourself is you're basically priming your mind to look for patterns of how it can get any better. Now, what happens when you have a bad day is I challenge you when you have a bad day. I don't think you had a bad day. What you had was a bad moment. And what this study found from Dr. Caroline Leaf, is that research shows when a person has a reaction to something, there's a 90-second chemical process that happens in the body. And after that, any remaining emotional response is just the person choosing to stay in that emotional loop. The story we create from those emotions is what sticks. So what's important about this is like, you didn't have a bad day, you had a bad moment. And then within 90 seconds, you can get out of that bad moment, or you can choose to stay in that bad moment. And then you add more bad moments and more bad moments. You prime yourself to look for more bad moments. And then guess what? You have a bad day. I know some people that are like, well, bad things happen in threes. Guess what? Then they do happen in threes. Because again, pattern recognition, you're looking for 3 bad things to happen in a row. So asking yourself with curiosity the question, how can it get any better than this, can change your day, can change your week, and potentially change your life. Now, let's get into this specific part between the I am versus I feel. So a friend of mine, Patricia Moreno, said, whatever comes after I am determines your life. So you really have to be careful about the words that you use after you say I am. So if you say I am mad, I am sad, I am a loser, I am not good enough. When you keep saying I am, you're solidifying it as something that's constant, right? While I feel is different. I feel is temporary. I feel sad. I feel like I'm not enough right now. I feel angry. I feel as if, I'm imposter. Okay. Well, that's something that's temporary. That isn't something that is going to be here forever. So we have to be really careful of what are the words that we're actually saying to ourselves, as well as to saying to others, because this is part of the old story we were talking about earlier, where it's just like you tell people, you're like, well, I'm just not good enough. Well, I am just, I'm never going to be, good at making videos. I'm not a good singer. I'm not a good writer. I'm not, like, what? Careful about what saying after I am. Now, you can say like, I am curious. You can say that, I am full of joy. Like when you're actually allowing your inner child to speak up, more of those I am statements can be really empowering. So we just have to, again, realize when are we using our I am statements and when are we using I feel statements? And then let's get into the actual idea of toxic positivity, because I want to address this idea that we're just like not just being happy all the time, right? Like that's not what I'm promoting here. Positive psychology is all about embracing the emotions that are coming at that very moment. Right. So, for example, my father passed away in 2015 and his brothers all showed up, brothers that had not seen each other in like 20 to 30 years since their mom passed away. So I'm feeling grief and sadness, because I'm trying to look at even my words. I am feeling grief. Yeah. So I'm feeling grief and sadness. But then they showed up and I was like, I'm feeling joy and gratitude. I can't have both of these feelings at the same time. And what a lot of positive psychology talks about is like, no, allow yourself to feel all of the feelings, not ignore them and just be like, everything's all happy. And, Inside Out, the movie from Pixar taught us that there is something magical. There's something magical in actually recognizing both, that there's something beautiful about sadness. Right? If you want to feel the high highs, if you want to feel the beauty of joy, you also have to recognize the beauty of sadness. You have to find the joy in the sadness and the joy of any feeling, because that's what life is. That's what life is. That's what we're living. All of the emotions, all of the time, we're experiencing all of them. And so I'm not saying do not deny those. Allow yourself to fully feel those. Like in Tuesdays with Maury be like, fully feel those feelings and then let them go. Recognize that they're temporary, but allow yourself to feel all the feelings, because that is what makes life so awesome. So finally, our bonus play experiment, and this kind of ties in with the I am versus I feel, is ask yourself, what is driving my decision? Is it perfection, ego, shame, fear of failure, trying to impress someone, trying to be right, right? Or the decision I'm about to make, is it coming from a place of curiosity, play, experimentation, embracing failure, just trying stuff out and just seeing what possibly happens because you're just curious about the world, right? So figure that out. Identify what is driving my decisions. So let's just recap all of the different play experiments because we covered so many different ones today. The first one is the one I asked you of like questioning your old story. What is your old BS story that you're telling yourself, and what is the new story you want to share? Second way in which to empower your intuition, your inner child, is to get bored and allow yourself to find your flow. So soothe, get bored, listen to your inner child, listen to that inner curiosity, follow that idea, that nerve-sided idea, take risks, let go of the result, and just see what happens. Find yourself in flow. And then third, the key one of today, name and befriend your inner critic. Remember, name your inner critic. Listen, write it down, listen to it, give it some love. If you need to embody it, you can embody it as well, but give it the attention that it needs, but also recognize that it's separate from you and it's not you. It's an older version of you. It's that hurt version of you. And it's okay. It just wants attention. So give it a certain amount of attention and then be like, okay, we're done for the day. You are not driving the vehicle. You get to sit in the back seat, fear, but you don't get to drive it anymore. Right. And then the curious question of how can it get any better than this? How fascinating. What is possible? Ooh, let me explore this with curiosity and then see where that adventure takes you. And the last one is, how is this decision being driven? Is it being driven by play, or is it being driven by perfection? So my final question to you is, what is an old BS story that you are finally ready to let go? Are you ready to let go of the story? And then if so, what is the new story that you want to tell yourself? What is the new adventure that you want to go on? And what is possible once you let go of this old story? So I always love to recap, with this. For anyone that hasn't seen this, this is a scene from Good Will Hunting, starring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. It was the first movie they ever tried, and it was a risk themselves, just taking a risk to make this movie, because this was the way they actually became famous. No one was paying attention to them, so they just made a movie, and we're just like, we're going to just make a really good movie, and that's how we're going to get into this business, right? But the lesson, or in the story that was really fascinating about this, is in this movie, Matt Damon is a genius. He can have any job he wants at any think tank. He's just this math genius. And his best friend, Ben Affleck, is not. He's not a genius. And they're at a construction site at the end of the movie. And Ben turns to him and he goes like, when are you going to take one of these high paying jobs? And Matt turns to him, he's like, I'm not. I'm going to work construction. I'm going to, raise my kid right next to you. We're going to take them to Foley Field, watch them play baseball. And, that's just what we're going to do. And Ben turns to him and he's just like, if I see you here in 20 years, I'm going to kill you. Like, I'm literally going to kill you. And Matt's like, what are you talking about? What? I owe it to myself? And he's like, no, forget you. You owe it to me, because I'm going to be here in 20 years. And I'm okay with that. But you are sitting on a winning lottery ticket and you're too scared to cash it in. And I really believe each and every one of you are sitting on multiple winning lottery tickets, multi-potential winning lottery tickets. And the thing is like, it's not about cashing it in for you. This is not actually about you. This is about this idea, this concept, that if you actually do the things that make you come alive, if you actually do the thing that you're really scared to do, but also super excited to do, that you then give the bravery of someone else to do the same. because there's someone that's paying attention to you now, even if you don't know it. It could be your kid, it could be your spouse, it could be one of your friends, it could be someone you don't even know exists, right? But when you take that risk, when you embrace all the different aspects of your life, right? All the ways you love to combine different things together that make you such an amazing multi-potentialite, and you do them, and you make something out of it, someone else watches that and they're like, that's possible? I did not know that was possible. You have now opened up a world where that is possible. And that ripple effect is massive. So when we talk about like, I want to change the world, I want to have an impact on the world, the thing to do is just simply do the things that make you come most alive. Do that. And that will be your legacy. That will be the impact you have. That will be the ripple that the world needs, right? Because like I go off the Howard Thurman quote, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is for more people to come alive. That is my workshop. I hope you had a huge amount of fun. And this is the last thing I'll say is, if you take any of these risks, if you do any play experiment, if you name your inner critic, tag me, find me on any of these, social media apps and tag me and be like, yo, I tried this. I don't care if you do this years from now. Still, let me know. Jeff Harry Plays, let me know, because the only reason I run this is, again, this brings me joy. This makes me come alive, right? And to know that this is actually having an effect on others, just like means the world to me. It motivates me when I get really like down and I start believing my inner critic, I start believing my Gargamel. So you're helping me out by sharing, by taking your risks and then letting me know what progress you have. Good luck. Have an amazing life. And really embrace the thing that makes you come alive and just play. Take care.